China's president, Xi Jinping, is not attending the summit. I want to bring in Jamil Jaffer to talk a little bit more about the summit. He's a national security expert and the founder and executive director of the National Security Institute at George Mason University's Antonin Scalia Law School. Thank you so much for joining us. So this should be an interesting, I think, G20 summit. You have a number of nations participating and not participating with both competing interests and also, overlapping interests, if you will. What are the main issues that will be discussed at the summit this weekend?
Well, Anne-Marie, I think we'll expect a lot of discussions about trade, global commerce, pandemic preparedness, certainly climate, which has been an issue at many of the G20 summits in the recent past will come up. And then, of course, technology issues and cooperation and competition, particularly with China and Russia, both of whose leaders will not be there. And of course, Anne-Marie, the war in Ukraine, which is an issue that divides the G20, will be a topic of discussion, although it's not on the official agenda.
Mm-hmm. And this is such an interesting moment, I think, for India. The president, going back to my Canadian roots, the president is going to be meeting with the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, today. This is, India on the world stage. And I talked about competing and overlapping interests. A little bit, this is a little India versus China, who is not there, as you pointed out. What will the two talk about? What's their relationship like? What are both of them hoping to get out of this G20 summit?
Well, one of the challenges for India is that it's long played this role of non-alignment, or maybe even multi-alignment, where it tries to work with all the nations in the various blocs. The challenge, though, it's seeing now is it's really waking up to the reality of a restive and a more aggressive China on its border. We saw the border dispute they had a few years back. And so that's going to be an issue for them to grapple with, and how close they decide to come to the United States and the Western bloc. India is a key part of the Quad, which is the U.S., Australia, Japan, and India, those Indo-Pacific nations, trying to address the very real challenge that China presents. And, importantly, India increasingly is a place where we have a huge Indian population in the United States. There's a huge amount of trade between our two countries. The U.S. is the single largest trading partner for India. So that relationship, President Biden going and President Xi not going, is going to be a key issue that's going to be a topic of discussion, not just for India, but for all the nations who see that happening.
So you mentioned President Xi is not in attendance, and we should point out that he did go to the BRICS Nations Summit. He managed to get there, but not to the G20. Also, Vladimir Putin is not there as well. What does this say maybe about the nature of this G20 gathering? Will it be as impactful without two key leaders there? And what does it say about the relationship that these world leaders have with other leaders?
Well, the G20 is the top 20 economies in the world, taking up about 80% of the world's gross domestic product. Now, the BRICS group is a smaller group. It's Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa, coming together to sort of be a contrast to other alliances. And so the fact that they were able to attend BRICS but not attending G20 sends a message that they favor that grouping versus this grouping. And for India, which is in both, that's the real challenge, is which grouping are they going to associate themselves more closely with? And going forward, what's in their best interest of the nation? You'll notice India has not condemned the Russian invasion of Ukraine, a sore spot for U.S.-India relations.
Yeah, and I should point out, part of the reason that Vladimir Putin can go to the BRICS summit is because he might have been arrested, because there's a warrant out for his arrest. Ukraine is not a G20 member, but President Zelensky did speak virtually at last year's summit, and I think he's scheduled to do it again today. India didn't invite him this year. What's the relationship like between India and Ukraine?
Well, this is a challenge because, as we know, Russia illegally invaded Ukraine, violated their territorial sovereignty and integrity. And India has not really, taken a strong position one way or the other on this invasion. And that's a challenge because a lot of the other sort of Western associated nations, again, India being non-aligned, is playing sort of in the middle. It's an issue for India's relationship with the Western countries. Of course, it improves their relationship with Russia. Russia, of course, is a huge supplier of oil to India. India has been buying more and more oil, another sore spot for the issue. Now, that being said, the U.S. has been very clear they want and expect President Zelensky to play an important role at the G20 and to be given a role. They just said that, reiterated that again just a few hours ago. So we'll see what happens going forward over the next couple of days as the summit moves forward.
And I should also ask you about President Biden's sort of push to beef up the World Bank. and reestablish, I guess, the World Bank as an diplomatic economic rival to what we've seen happening with China around the world. Is it a little too late? I'm not sure, but what is the president hoping to accomplish with this?
One of the key issues, as you know, that we the American people all woke up to, was the challenge of supply chains. We saw during the pandemic the hard part of getting PPE and getting pharmaceutical precursors. That continues to be an issue. We're obviously trying to diversify our supply chain away from China, given the potential geopolitical challenges there. And so what President Biden would like to do is to use the World Bank as a way to demonstrate that we can fund projects in other nations and create supply chains elsewhere. He'll be also going to Vietnam, a country that the U.S. hopes can be a place where we can manufacture goods at a low cost, but diversify away from China. So that's going to be one of the efforts that the president is hoping to solidify at this G20 meeting.
Actually, I'm really glad that you brought up Vietnam, because I had read that was the other country that President Biden was hoping to sort of shore up a relationship with. Why Vietnam?
Well, Vietnam, large population, longtime U.S. ties, of course, going back to the challenge in the war. But we've obviously rebuilt that relationship. It's now a strong relationship. I think the hope is that Vietnam can be a place where we move a significant portion of American manufacturing, still take the benefit of reasonable cost labor, create jobs and opportunities for people in Vietnam, and ultimately create an opportunity for the United States to diversify its supply chain away from China.
All right, Jamil, Jaffer, thank you so much.
Thanks, Amory.